Hello, everyone. Well, here we are at the fourth video, so we're getting there. Thank you, everyone who's been subscribing and liking the videos and leaving comments. And I particularly want your comments because I'm looking for inspiration about the kinds of things that you might like to hear on these videos. So it's just really wonderful to see so many people watching them, and I've spoken to a lot of people who tell me that they're watching them, so that's exactly what's supposed to happen. Well done, you. So today we're going to talk about the purpose of support. What is the real reason that we are actually asking people to come to work with our sons and daughters, or the person that we're providing support to in our service? And I think this is actually a question we don't ask ourselves often enough, is it? What is it that we really want for this person? And I think that there are a lot of things that are very unconscious that drive, and some of them conscious, that drive us around what it is that we want people to be doing during their hours of support. So I think the first thing is that for a lot of people, unconsciously, what we want to see is people entertained. And entertaining people with disability is one of those things that just makes my teeth on edge, because actually the last thing in the world that people need to be entertained. As human beings and citizens of the world, we have a lot of things to do. And being entertained is one of a number of things that we might need, but it is most certainly not the only thing that we need. Now, having fun while we're doing what we're doing is another thing altogether, and I'm a great believer that both the people who come to work should know how to have a good time, and the people they work with should actually be having a good time while out and about doing the things that are the important aspects of working with an individual with disability who may need extra support to do the things that the rest of us may or may not be able to do readily or easily. So entertaining is not it, just so we get that pretty clear right from the get-go. And the other thing I think is that we think that we need to do for the person. A lot of people think that. Community sometimes thinks that. Families sometimes think that. And sometimes the person with disability themselves think that. That what we're really doing is actually doing stuff for the person because they are hopeless helpers, never will be able to do these things for themselves. And this is one of the tragedies of support as it's offered to people, and has been since the beginning of actual more formalised support occurred, where we kind of said we had higher expectations, but actually what we really meant was this person can't do it for themselves, and so when you come to work, you're charged with doing things for the individual. The tragedy of that was that many people who already had skills lost them because no one ever asked them to use them. And the other tragedy of that is I often hear people talking about how people manipulate them to do things for them, when in fact the real reason here is that the person learned, A, they don't do it as well as everybody else, or the person will just take it over and do it after. And so, the big no-no is when we're doing with people, not for people, we're leaving the space available for that person to do it in their own time, in their own way, and we are there to assist when that doesn't work for the individual. And you know what? I think that works for all of us, doesn't it? In the ways that we're working, together with other people. And the third thing I think that unconsciously drives a lot of this is that we want to keep people safe. We think that what we're doing with people is actually making sure that people will be safe. And of course we want people to be safe. A no-brainer. But there is a problem with thinking that safety is a primary goal, the only goal, I should say, because actually in the developmental model, there needs to be a certain level of risk in order to grow and learn, and that's what we all had. The day that you sent your children up to childcare, you may or may not have been very relieved, but you would have also been worried that things would be okay and people would be good with them. And so this is a very underpinning thing around families, but also in services, where services can often be very risk averse. So they won't do the things a person needs to keep on growing and learning, because in order to do that, they would actually be compromising their version of what it is to keep people safe. See, that's been going on since, what's that saying? Adam was a boy. So do people actually get entertainment when they go out and about with the person that's supporting them? Maybe not. I don't see a lot of entertainment going on. I'm a big observer of how people are being given the opportunities during their time in support, and I see a lot of people walking around looking at their phones. Can I say that to me, whatever you're doing on that phone, and maybe it's actually writing your case notes or whatever it is that you want to tell me you're doing, the fact of the matter is people seem to be doing that all shift. And so the message to the community is that you are not engaged with this person that you're working with, and that is not okay. So this bit about being on the phone and not engaged is definitely the stuff that we really need to be, looking into and making sure that we've got that right. And I think that one of the big things is both people often look very bored. So here we are in Australia, the National Disability Insurance Scheme. People have got money to go out. There's thousands and thousands of dollars being provided for people to get the support they need. Once, a long time ago, in the back of my memory, the NDIS was pretty keen on the idea that people would grow and develop and build capacity, which is their version of a developmental model, by the way. But I do not see any evidence that this is actually required in the work that people do with the individual. So what would be the expectations of services, families, a person with disability themselves, and or, by the way, those of you who, as workers, really aspire to doing the very best you can? Well, the first thing is to come on to shift as agreed. I've heard a worrying level of information from some service providers and families where a person's rung up and said, I can't actually come to shift today in 2 hours because I'm going to be minding my grandchildren. Their mother has to go to work. So I think underpinning a lot of stuff that goes on in service land and in support land generally is that people don't quite understand that they have got a job. It's a job like any other job. You said you're coming to work, you come to work. If you're sick, of course you don't. And by the way, while as a good Australian I would defend everyone's right to have a sickie, if that's what they do, a sickie for those people outside Australia is when people don't go to work and they claim they're sick but they're not. Well, when I ran a service, I would say to people, you can do that, but you can't do that here. So if you come to work here, you have to be the kind of person who takes your roster seriously and comes to work when you said you would, unless you've broken your leg. And if you can get that cast on and come later, that would be even better. Only joking. The other thing is to come on time. I know it's an extraordinary idea, but come on time and be ready for work. So everything that you need to start work is available to you at 9 o'clock if your shift starts at 9. Now, in family land, this can be a very interesting thing. In our world, I wanted people to turn up at 9 o'clock on the dot because when I was supporting my children, I might not even be dressed by 5 to 9, and I would need every moment to be ready for people to be in my house. Now, the children's dad would actually think at 10 to 9 if people weren't there, he'd be phoning me saying, they're not here, they're not coming. So it's very good if you're working, in that family-driven way to understand what it is that the family is requiring from you, in terms of what it says when it says turn up in time for work. And actually, if that's unreasonable, to be able to have a proper conversation about what could be possible and how we could assuage that worry that people weren't coming, which, by the way, might have happened because people don't often come. The second thing, the third thing is to know what's happening today. So if you're going to turn up at work, you do need to know what's happening today. So if the person's going swimming today, you need to have your togs. Because, by the way, in this model of engagement that I'm talking about, you don't sit on the sidelines like mummy holding the bags while someone's in the water. If the person's in the water, you're in the water. That's actually a risk management strategy, and a message to the community that you really are there together, and actually in the developmental model looking for what you need to know to help this person manage the situation they're in now and have the maximum enjoyment and growth out of anything they're doing, including going swimming. And I come from the tropics, so we're always going swimming. I think people need to come to work prepared for the known and the unknown. So it's not, if you're one of those people who can't cope with difference or change, then this probably is not the work for you, because you do need to be able to, in that new word that everyone's talking about, well, not a new word, but it is the word, and that you have to be able to pivot. You have to be able to do what needs to happen when it becomes obvious it needs to happen. I don't need to say to you that you need to be respectful. Coming to work and being respectful of the person you work with is like support work 101. And you know, my sister and I cared for our mum for many years, and she was this very gorgeous, very elderly lady with very white hair who'd sit in the chair, and we'd go out places, and people would do this thing where they'd kind of give you this look, which was like, cute. Well, my mother wasn't cute. My mother was the matron of a children's home. She had been a tough cookie. She was not a cute person. And so really helping people understand who my mum really was inside, when that barrier of age and disability had kind of created a different version of who she might be to the unknowing observer, we would not collude with people on those things. We would make sure that we were giving Mum all the respect we could to make sure that she would be seen in just the way she would. If she went to hospital, we'd take photographs of her as a nursing sister so that people in the ward would know that she had, you know, she'd been a triple certificate sister and actually was very comfortable in hospital, but not as a patient, and so understood a lot about what was going on. And I think the other thing that good workers need to know is that you need to work to the person's strengths. So this is called what we call a strengths-based model. But actually, when we talk about working to the person's strengths, it also means that you need to know what the person's support needs are. So we're not talking about their deficits. That comes from a deficit-based model. We're talking about knowing and understanding what your role is in supporting this person to undertake any task, as small or as large as it is, so that you're doing exactly what you need to do to support this individual to maximal independence. Now, when we're talking about independence and not doing for people what they can do for themselves, I get worried that people will get very kind of, I'm going to use the word, autistic, and not understand that a rule can be broken. So, you know, if I was here now and doing this video, and someone was here and they said to me, Annie, would you like a coffee? They wouldn't say, and I said yes, they wouldn't say, you can go and get it for yourself because you know how to make a coffee. They would make it for me because I was otherwise engaged, or I might be tired, or I might just like someone to look after me for a little minute, right? So in this business of making sure that you're doing for, not with, it doesn't mean that you could not, you know, that kindness goes out the window or that you would never do anything nice for that person. But it does mean that we really need to be sure that we are working in this framework that says this person is a competent individual and can become more competent over time. By the way, for all of us, particularly families and for you people with disability who might be watching, this developmental model, we're in a very long game with this, you know. We're not actually doing something that's going to change the world for that person in 5 minutes. It takes time, and we need to understand and appreciate that. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. And the other thing is, you know, we used to say this for years, and I think people still say it. I'm not sure if they know what it means, but in the work, we should be thinking about doing ourselves out of a job. Even when we're working with a person who's going to need support every day of their life, we are working in that developmental model that is making sure that we are doing with, not for. I must have said that 15 times now, so hopefully that if you take nothing away from this video, you could take that and you could write that in the comments if you felt like you had a mind to. So how or what needs to happen on shift for the individual? What are the kinds of things that we need to be looking for to make sure that the person, the worker, knows what they're doing? Because one of the things I think that workers get very, very poor support from services and families around what is the plan. The person may or may not have anything regular that happens during the week, except maybe an occasional doctor's appointment. Well, if the person's got nothing regular happening during the week, it's going to be very hard for that person to stay engaged all day, and also for your son or daughter to stay engaged all day if there's no plan or nothing regular that happens. And so I believe that if you really want to set up the support to work really well for the individual, we need to make sure that we have made a plan. And we will do a video on that soon for those people who don't really understand about planning. But I find it really amazing that we could send our sons and daughters out, or the person that you're providing support to, with an individual and expect that individual to find all these amazing things to happen every day that's not just entertaining, but really helping that individual learn and grow and get to be better connected in their community. So 101, I think, is that everybody needs a plan. It could be a one-page document that someone created. I think it's better when it's like a few hours where people get together with that individual and work out how to actually, what is it that this person would love to do, and what would really, what are the goals that we're trying to work on to make all that possible. So if we're going to be doing that, what are the things that we would want to plan for? Well, I think one of the first things, if we take back from the 5 frameworks for accomplishment, which was the last video, is that we want to move from presence to participation. So we want people out and about in the community, and we want them really engaged in community. So going to the regular places and spaces so that people there know and appreciate this individual. So Neil Barringham calls this the sweet spot. Neil Barringham runs a service in West End in Brisbane called A Place to Belong. And that is a thing that really resonated with me when he spoke about that once many, many years ago, and I've used it every time I plan or think about what needs to happen for my own children or for people that I'm working with. And so going back to the same places, the same coffee shop, the same pool, the same library, the same supermarket, hopefully same checkout check if you can, because then different things happen. And I'll tell you a story from many years ago. I was working in the first service I ever worked in, and one of the people there had a tick that was that he would touch the cash register. And his day service wouldn't take him out to shops because they were worried that he would get arrested, which I thought was a little extreme. Risk-averse services, remember that? But we, of course, did. And so of an evening on Thursday nights, he would go and do his grocery shopping with his worker. And one day we had a student working with us for a period of time. So she was with them for that event. So she went out with them to the local supermarket. And as they went through the gates, she saw someone she knew on checkout. So she went over to say hello. And this checkout person said to her, "Do you know that guy?" And she said, "Yeah, I'm doing blah, blah, blah." And she said, "Oh, he comes through my checkout lots. The first time he came, he touched my the till, the cash register, and I freaked because I thought he was trying to steal money. But then after I got to know him, I realized, and this is the big bit, he just does that. That's a sweet spot. That's when somebody has gotten over a difference. The person didn't have to stop doing it. We'd like them to, but they're not doing it yet. But the person in community knows this individual and understands that that's going to be okay. He's not trying to steal the takings. He actually just needs to touch the cash register." Powerful, hey? So the whole idea of creating that sweet spot is to try and make that more possible. And, you know, when you go to a regular cafe all the time, the person knows your order, they know your name, they notice when you're not there, and actually another video will be about working to make sure that the worker stands back and allows the individual, even if they have a severe communication impairment, to actually be the primary person in that transaction. And if the worker behind the counter, the cashier, doesn't understand what the person's saying, that the support worker can step in to actually check with the individual by saying, "Was that a vanilla milkshake you wanted, so-and-so?" But never looking at the cashier. And then the transaction goes back to being between the person who's paying, the person who's buying, and the person who's selling. And we need to get much better at these very, very low-key ways of building capacity in community and capacity in the people that we're working with. So that's the lot for today. This first section is around these kinds of concepts. The next one will be on the developmental model. So watch this space for that. Thank you for watching.